After a month of spectacular matches, the 2019 World Cup ended when the Netherlands and the United States battled for the title. While we should have celebrated the teams that had gone this far, it was also a depressing reminder of the extent to which many former players had to go, simply to be allowed to play. As recently as the 1980s, 4 out of the 24 countries competing in the 2019 World Cup had outright bans on women's soccer. So, stay tuned to discover more about these countries and the bans they placed on their women's soccer teams. Welcome to another Cracked Sports video. Let's start this video by looking at women's soccer in Brazil. As one of the oldest and most well-known footballing nations, Brazil's treatment of its women's soccer team is quite shocking. Although women's soccer was not officially recognized in Brazil, its popularity grew until 1941, when the government established Decree Law 3199, prohibiting women from participating in a wide range of activities, including soccer, for fear of violent sports being harmful to the female body. This did not stop women from participating in the sport. It merely moved it away from the public's eyes. Brazil removed the restriction in 1981, yet the echoes can still be sensed among some in power, who would rather not see women play soccer. One glimmer of hope is that the grassroots organizations in Brazil are working to provide more possibilities for female soccer players to develop into international players. The drawback is that players rarely have the support systems they need to succeed, unlike their male counterparts. This has formed a haves and have-nots situation, in which the women who receive the most support and attention are only supported by their wealthy families, moving away from the working-class dreams that soccer provides to male Brazilians. It's often hard to distinguish the lack of support from a team's lack of success. Brazil was knocked out in the round of 16 for the third time in a row at the World Cup. Despite being rated third in the world a decade ago, Brazil has fallen behind countries such as Australia and Canada, which hardly register a blip in the men's game but fund and support their women's teams more than Brazil does. Like Brazil, Germany had its own silly reasons for prohibiting women from playing soccer. The ban, which was introduced in West Germany in 1955, said that soccer was principally against the nature of women and that women were too fragile to participate in sports. Not only did the Soccer Association believe that playing soccer was unwomanly, but it would also doom women's souls. Players were obviously upset, but their protests turned to deaf ears. It took Germany until 1970 to agree to allow women to play soccer, and even then, the National Soccer Association imposed absurd restrictions. Women were only given a chance to play when the weather was pleasant. They couldn't wear a certain type of soccer shoes, and the ball was smaller and lighter. Also, games were limited to 70 minutes because it was thought that this was a more woman-friendly approach to playing the game. Given that the rest of the world used the same equipment and rules as men, this left the German women's squad totally unprepared for international competition. Germany did not qualify for the first Women's European Championship in 1984, but after forming a national league in the 1990s, they were able to recover. Germany went on to become one of the world's most successful women's teams, winning the World Cup in both 2003 and 2007. Germany has also won 8 European championships, but more recently, the country failed to come up to expectations in the 2019 World Cup, was knocked out in the 2017 Euro quarterfinals, and failed to qualify for Tokyo's 2020 Olympic Games. Scotland's background with women's soccer is truly horrific, because it not only upheld the United Kingdom's prohibition on women participating until 1971, but also lobbied for other countries to do the same. Scotland has some of the earliest written records of women playing soccer, dating back to 1628. The general populations had not been happy with women playing the game for decades, but it wasn't until the Victorian era that there was talk of outright banning it. There was an inherent belief that women should not play soccer, simply for their personal safety, but also because it harmed the sport as a whole and degraded a man's game. Attempts to intervene in women playing soccer started in the 1890s when Scottish medical professionals announced that the sport was dangerous to women's health. The game continued to be played until 1921. In that year, British women were banned from playing soccer. Scotland is unique in the argument for the football ban because it was the one and only member state to vote against a UEFA proposal for its members to support the women's game. After the 31-1 vote, Scotland begrudgingly started to allow women to play soccer. The Scottish women's soccer team has struggled to recover. In 2019, it qualified for the World Cup but was eliminated in the group round. When it comes to women's soccer, Spain is a late starter. There's no doubt that women have played the game for years in Spain, with casual records reaching back to 1914, but there was no official system until 1970, when underground soccer teams began to emerge in the country, despite the sport being banned in 1935. Following the UEFA vote in 1971, Spain played its first international match against Portugal. Still, the Spanish government did everything it could to slow the team's growth. Despite this, women continued to play soccer. The National Football Association recognized women's soccer in 1980, and a league was formed in 1988. Now, with the help and support of La Liga, the women's competition in Spain is progressing. It's being sponsored by top flight clubs and presented as a marketable product in the country. After the long term ban, Spain is still establishing its footing internationally. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.